Hello, today we are going to have a look at routes and flight planning with the big jets in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and where you may have used a free application that is fantastic called LittleNavMap in the past. While it's great for doing point-to-point navigation, not a lot of people know it can actually handle air corridors or routes as well, airways. So normally when you use LittleNavMap, you might go and set a departure airfield and set a destination airfield, and you might add a waypoint to that route, and you'll say, for example, add that, and you've got a nice list of point-to-point navigation waypoints to fly through. That's not the whole story with aviation. Once you get to high altitude, routes come into effect. So if we go and remove those waypoints, and we go and click on, there's an icon at the top of the map with a J on it. Those are the jet airways, or the high altitude routes. So when you click on it, the map gets covered in a spider's web. And these are the accepted kind of standard routes between waypoints that will be used at high altitude by jet traffic. And if you go and zoom in on them, you can see each of these lines has a number, and it's worth pointing out the lines maybe don't always go in a straight line. Sometimes they go around corners. You can see one there, UN 57 takes a turn, but it takes a turn at a waypoint. That becomes important later. But if we zoom in on them, you can see that an airway has a name. J just means it's a high altitude airway, and it has a number. That's the minimum altitude for travelling along that airway. Okay, so if we zoom back out, I've made the fonts bigger in LittleNavMap just so we can see the names of them easily. So, the big problem with LittleNavMap, as of 2022, is you can't right-click on those routes and add them into your flight plan. You have to put them in as text. Now, if you have seen a SimBrief flight plan or a real-world flight plan, you will have seen a long string of text that describes the entire flight plan. And I've got an example that we're going to do today, or we're going to program into an aircraft today and look at in LittleNavMap as well. So I'm going to open Notepad, and there we go. There's a huge string of text. And you're probably horrified at this point if you've never seen one of these before and thinking, how am I ever going to understand what that is? It's actually quite straightforward. The first four characters are the ICAO code, or the ID code, of the departure airfield. So this is EGSS, which is Stansted in London. The final four characters are the destination airfield. So EGPH is Edinburgh in Scotland. The next group of characters after the departure airfield is made up of two parts. There's letter N and then 4 digits. That's the intended cruise speed for the aircraft once it reaches cruise altitude. The next part, and it's in knots, it's worth pointing out, the next part is the cruise altitude or flight level, and it's in hundreds of feet. So 280 is 28,000 feet. So all you need to do in your head is add 2 zeros on the end to think about it in feet, and that's above sea level. Okay, so the next thing you will get after the speed and altitude is the standard instrument departure code for departing the departure airfield. So in this case it's the BKY5R departure from Stansted. Now, SIDs, or standard instrument departures, are just sequences of waypoints with altitude restrictions perhaps on those waypoints. And this is a quick way, it's a shorthand way of programming perhaps quite a complex sequence into the aircraft in one go. It's almost like a macro. Okay, at the other end, just before the destination airfield, you've got the standard approach route, or STAR. And again, just like the SID, it is shorthand for perhaps a number of waypoints, speeds and altitude restrictions that are commonly known, and the aircraft can look up in one go as soon as it sees that code. Now, in between there, we've got the actual route between the departure airfield and the destination airfield. So we've got a waypoint. Notice there's a there are differences here. There are combinations of characters. So Mowgli, Mammal, Gasco and Nateb are all waypoints. In between them, L613, UY250 and UP18 are routes or airways. Yeah, so you can go from Mowgli to Mammal via the L613 route. So you can look at the map and figure these out just by looking at them. From Mammal you can take UY250 to Gasco, so it's almost like motorways in the sky. So let's go, now we've got that written out, let's copy it and go into LittleNavMap, go to the flight plan menu and say new flight plan from route description. And you can do this from a plan you've got from somewhere else, like Simbrief for example. So you say new flight plan and we paste in our route. And you can even see as you hover over it, it explains what some of the bits are it's expecting to see. And we can say read the route description please. And it's saying EGSS, Mowgli, Betax. So you can see it's actually found lots more than we've actually written. So if we create that flight plan, so it's asking if we want to save changes to what we had, and no we don't. And suddenly it's drawn the entire plan in. So if we go and zoom in to the departure airfield, which was Stansted, this orange part is the standard instrument departure as far as this waypoint here, DE3. So you can see the whole sequence of the standard instrument departure is listed out here. You can also see we didn't write any of this in our description. There are altitude restrictions. Yeah? There are also lots of waypoints along that route. So all we put into our flight plan was BKY5R, and that spat that out of its database. It knows what it means. Then we got to the beginning of the part that we put in. So we went from Mowgli, we took L613 to Mammal, then we took UY250 to Upton, or actually we didn't. We didn't put Upton in our list. So this is a good example of where a waypoint on the route has been injected because it's on the route, so it's done it for us. So you can see there's a whole sequence here that we didn't put in of Upton, Batley, Rimto and Oboxa, and you can see they are along the route. And eventually we get to Gasco, which we did put in, and then we took UP18, but again look, there are waypoints en route which it has put in for us on the way to Nateb. And Nateb was the last piece of the jigsaw we put in. And then after that we intercept the beginning of the standard approach route, which is the orange part. And notice there is this route does not describe the final approach into Edinburgh. So we might have to go into here and show the arrival procedures for Edinburgh and say we're going to use runway ILS for runway 6 or ILS for runway 24 for example, and we insert that in. So that's beyond the end of the standard approach route. Yeah, and there's a subject that comes up a lot. You typically wouldn't program all of the end of the route in when you take off, because this may change while you're in the air. Yeah, you may have an airport with lots of runways for example, and your exact runway on your exact route in may be chosen while you're on the standard approach route. So as you're on approach, they'll be deciding how to actually get you into the airport. Okay, so how do we put this into the aeroplane? We've seen it on the map, so it was putting a text description in was a nice way of programming an awful lot of information really quickly. And you can see, look, we've got that minimum altitude from the route, but we're flying at 28,000 feet, so we don't really care. Remember, that was in our description as well, so it picked it up. So let's go and do this in the aeroplane and see how we get on. So we've got the 737 here, and we're going to look in the cockpit. Now all I've done so far is powered up the 737, so it's sat here and we haven't really done anything with it yet. So we're going to go and look in on the FMC. We're going to give it, it's saying nav data is out of date, we'll just clear that. It wants an IRS position, so position initialization, next page, pick up the GPS, previous page, and drop it in. So this is all standard stuff. I've got other videos about this. So we are taking off from Stansted, which was EGSS. Okay, now we go to the route page. EGSS is already in the scratchpad, so we can transfer it into the origin of our route. We're going to Edinburgh, which is EGPH. We can drop that in there. We can put in the runway we are departing Stansted on, which would be runway 22. Okay, notice though, we are not going to go straight and do departures, arrivals or anything like that. We'll go to the legs page. We're not going to do that, or the route page, sorry. We're going to go next here. So when we are programming origin and destination, notice we are on page 1 of 2. We can go to the next page. Yeah? And we can put in a sequence of vias and twos. So on the right hand side we're going to be putting waypoints. On the left hand side we're going to be putting airways. Now remember, we haven't done departure and arrival yet, so we're going to ignore those parts of the plan. So let's go and have a look at our plan. We are interested in the first waypoint to the last waypoint. Yeah? So we're going to go direct to Mowgli. So how do we do that? We're not going to put anything in ahead of it. So what was the name of it again? MOGLI. So we go MOGLI, and we put it straight in the 2 box. And by default it knows that we've got nothing ahead of it, so we're going direct to Mowgli. Then we're going to take L613 to Mammal. So we could type in L613 and we put that on the left hand side, and then we put the waypoint it leads to on the right hand side. Then we're going to take UY250 to Gasco. So UY250 to Gasco, GASKO. Then finally up 18 to Nateb. So up 18 to Nateb. And that is our route. Now notice we can now activate that route and execute it. So the next thing we might do is go and set up the departure and arrivals to put the SID and the STAR on the ends of the flight plan. So let's go and do the SID first, the departure. So it already knows we said runway 22 earlier, so we're going to do the BKY5R standard instrument departure, which is what we saw here. And we execute that. Then we can go back to the index page. We can go to EGPH, Edinburgh, go to the arrivals. We want to come in runway 24, and we're going to use the AGP E1E. So that was the bit down here, look, AGP E1E. And we've now programmed the STAR, and we can execute that. Now if we go and look in the legs page now, you will see it still won't be perfect. So if we go next, there is a discontinuity between the end of the standard instrument departure and the beginning of our route. We can see that on LittleNavMap. There's the beginning of our route at Mowgli. There's the end, so there's a gap. So the flight management computer isn't going to invent that for us of how we get from D358C over to Mowgli. But we can just say, well, ignore it. We want you to fly direct between there. So we'll grab Mowgli and pull it up 1 to close the gap in the plan. So it will just fly between them itself without wanting to know anything else. If we go and carry on next page, we can see we have another discontinuity. So there's a couple of them actually. So that's the end of Nateb. So if we go and look back on the map at Nateb, our route only took us as far as Nateb, which is at Newcastle, but the standard approach route into Edinburgh begins at Akped, so we've got the same problem. There's a gap. So what we'll do is close it up. So we go next page, we select Agped, previous page, and then pull it over the top of the gap. Yeah, and it just closes the gap up. Notice when we do that, the changes go grey and it says we're on a modified route now. So we have to execute it to make that the active route. We had one more. So the gap between the standard approach route and the ILS, again there's another gap, and we can see that on the map as well. So if we go and have a look, if we come in here, Tartan was the end of the standard approach route, and the ILS doesn't start until CI24. So there's another gap here where the aeroplane's not going to make it up for us, so we have to close that gap up. Okay, and then we've got our route done. So if we go to the legs page and go back, I'm just wondering why we haven't got a display on here. I'm sure I turned on the power. Okay, let's have a look overhead. That'd be a shame if I can't show you that. Let's turn ground power on. The APU should be running, and it is, so let's go to APU. Maybe ground power isn't connected properly. Or maybe it's a glitch. It may be a glitch actually. Yeah, we've got a screen has failed, but look over here. We'll give it a few seconds and see if it comes to life. We can do it on the co-pilot side. It's not a problem. I think it's a glitch in the simulator. It shows these things are sent to challenge us. So if we go to go to the legs page. The reason I'm doing this is I want to show you, if we go to plan, yeah, we get to step through our route so we can see those waypoints. So if we keep pressing step, so all I've done to do that is you go to the legs page on the FMC and then you put the EFIS display into plan mode, and it puts a center marker next to the waypoints, and then you can press the step button at the bottom right to step through, and this will change to show you whichever waypoint has the center marker against it, so you can check your route. So you can see D170H is there in the middle, and step, step, step. It's worth doing this just to make sure you've not got anything wildly wrong in your plan. So if we zoom out, we can see more context there of the wider plan. So if we go step, 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 step. Yep, so the advantage of doing this, of course, is the aircraft has managed to put in a lot of waypoints that are along the airways for us. Yeah, we didn't program half of these waypoints. It's inserted them because they were en route, so it's done it for us. Okay. Notice as well on the legs page you get the altitude restrictions showing up for the standard instrument departure and the standard approach route. But anyway, we've covered everything I wanted to today, so it was really about understanding what a route description looks like and how to get the airways both into the aircraft and into LittleNavMap. So the trick with LittleNavMap was to go into the flight plan menu and do a new flight plan from a route description. Yeah, and that meant you could type into here. So you could reference it on the map. You know, you could go and do some research if you wanted to do a route yourself, or you could go and use something like SimBrief where it would give you a sequence of airways automatically. It's worth pointing out, and I'm not going to get into it here, if you look up here, calculate a flight plan between departure and destination, there's a magic wand in the toolbar. And when you select that, you can say use the jet airways and it will figure it out for you. So if you just want to go from A to B, you can get LittleNavMap to figure out the jet airways for you. But I actually think it's quite good fun to go and look at them myself and figure out my route and, you know, and write the descriptions in and program them in myself. So there you go. That's Airways and how to program them in the 737 in-flight simulator. Okay, I'll see you all again soon.